Welcome to the Autistic Licence podcast. I'm Leo in London.
I'm Shauna and I'm in Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland.
We invite you to listen in on our conversations as we get to know one another and experiment with unmasking in an autistic space. We talk about what it means to discover we're autistic as adults, especially with established careers as therapists. Here, we'll let people know that autistic therapists exist to contribute to the evolving neurodiversity dialogue and with each other to create an engaging and dynamic space. Everyone's welcome. You don't need to be autistic or to be a therapist to join us. We're sure you'll find something of interest and connection here. So what are you up to then?
Well, as you know already.
You're in a special room.
I am painting my doll's house. So before we came on call, Leo and I were texting and we were both very happily spinning in our autistic ways. So we decided to come on call to see if we could transfer some of that joy through the podcast. So I am doll's housing. So what I mean by that is...
Should we start by explaining what spin is?
Okay, you explain what spin is.
Spin is a contraction of special interest.
It is. S-P-I-N,
that's it.
Spin for special and in for interest. Yes. So Leo is in between clients and I have a free evening. My daughter is out without me this evening. And so I will use a night like this because I'll not get interrupted at all to lose myself in a special interest, which at the minute for me is decorating dolls' houses. And I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years. First of all with my daughter, and then we ended up doing separate projects over the years. And I got a new one a couple of months ago, which I think did feature in a interruption on one of our episodes whenever I got that. And so, I'm gradually deconstructing it and constructing it and decorating it again. And Leo, do you want to say what you were doing?
Not really, because you see, what you're doing is interesting and unusual, I think, because I don't know anybody else who does that. What I was doing is so stereotypically an autistic boy thing to do, which is to obsess about public transport. I was driving trains in a computer train simulator, and I've come to realise what I like about that as a special interest, if that's what it is. It's, I like flight simulators, train simulators, buses, trucks as well. I do a little bit of.
Yes.
That's the only gaming really that I do. It's not really gaming, it's simulating. And I've never, for example, with the flying stuff, I've never gone for what I think most people seem to go for, which is like jet fighters and fast things and fighting things. I like regulated, slow, timetabled public service type things. That's where my interest is. So it's always public transport. And I think if I think about it, again, one of the things that suddenly comes to me because I'm talking to you is that I used to pretend I was kind of driving buses or trains as far back as I can even remember. I can remember camping holidays with the family. They'll be hearing this for the first time. They'll have no idea I was doing this. I would sit in the car, stationary, just in the campsite, and pretend I was driving. But I wasn't pretending I was driving the car. I was pretending I was driving a train or a bus, something that was slow, regular, stuck to a timetable, picked up passengers, did a service.
Lovely.
And here we go. I'm 57 and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I don't go and spot trains. I can see exactly why people do that. The collecting thing. I've never done anything like that. I used to know a guy who was a bus spotter, which I didn't know existed.
Okay, yeah.
Where he would collect the serial numbers, not the route numbers of buses. I don't do any of that, but I get it.
You get it, yeah. And remember we talked about those stereotypes last time, and I feel like, people could say it's a stereotype, but there's so many different ways in which you can be interested in everyday things like transport. And in a way, mine's a stereotype if you think about, little girls wanting something to organise and something normal and something that they can play out and they can make come alive and things like that. And, I don't know how normal. Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe the dolls housing community does have lots of autistic people in it. I think people are drawn to it for different reasons. But for me, whenever I hear you talk about just the normal kind of run of the mill, just everyday life and playing that out, there's almost like it's connected maybe to our need as children for scripting and, forward planning. Maybe someone might say that and then you might say that. Maybe with learning how to be social. For me, if I enacted it all in dolls' houses when I was little and with my dolls all had relationships with each other and, so I don't know, but maybe I played that out. But there's also just something about it all being mini that means that you can see the whole as well. And I think that did something for me rather than only having the small things, because I tend to only see the detail. In everyday life, I'm quite stereotyped like that as an autistic person. But something like this allows me to see the whole. And not just the detail. Even though I have to do things in detail, I've always got the whole project in front of me, and it'll always be exactly as I left it when I go back to it.
Yes, that's incredibly attractive. A whole bunch of things occurred to me while you're talking. First of all, that I did an ADHD sidebar while I was talking before, and I didn't get to the point that actually I originally started out with, which was that there's that it's the controlled regulation part is how to make order in a world that feels ever so chaotic. So if I know that I'm sticking to a timetable, making these regular stops, then there's something relational, because an important aspect of that was that I was doing this public service thing. I was providing something for other people, and therefore there was this relational thing with other people. And as you were just talking about that kind of everydayness, the word that came to me was mundane. It's the mundane. And maybe there's something that's actually quite in common with what you're doing and what I'm doing. That we are recreating the mundanity of everyday of the everyday world. In a way that we control, not in a control freaky stereotype way, but in a way that we can make it make sense and regulate it ourselves. And you also have this relational part of it when you're having, you're fantasizing about the relationships that the dolls have with each other and their personalities. But none of that is risky, because it's all contained within you.
Yes.
Lovely. Touched on a couple of things around our kind of therapeutic cause, because you talked about scripting before. So that's a big thing in transaction analysis, which is my background. And then there was something about the different. I was wondering if the different characters maybe are. You did actually end up talking about it being elements of yourself, but I was thinking then of parts, which is the bit that I've picked up from you about internal family systems.
Yeah. There could well be, like, we don't explicitly talk about that, but there could well be, and there's so many similarities with like what happens in the SAN play that I do. So as well as internal family systems, I do Jungian SAN play, and we don't interpret in that. People just have a tray and lots of minifigures, and they just put them in the tray and create scenes. And, and then every time after a session, like, I take photos of them, and then sometimes we do reviews and we look at the whole series of pictures. And often there's stories that come out, but we don't actually say, that is that part of you that felt such and such at that time, or, you know, that must be the relationship with whoever in your life or anything like that. But on an unconscious level, and sometimes like coming into consciousness is an awareness as time goes on of, that oil that's in the tray means such and such about me, or the tiger might be this, or perhaps that is something symbolic of this. But oftentimes we don't even need to talk about it because it still does its work. And even like, you know, the really interesting thing is, so I love Christmas miniatures, and I've always loved Christmas miniatures. So like I've got 2 trees because I can't fit them all on one tree because I've been collecting for so long.
That's the best thing I've ever heard.
So
I love that.
It's so autistic.
The trees are just vehicles for the ornaments. That's fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. And every ornament has a story. So, I remember where all the ornaments came from and when they were bought. There's not any the same. There's no packs. They're all individual, and they all have a story.
Yes.
And I was doing that forever and not making any connection between my love of those and like real love of those. Like I'm not really into Christmas for lots and lots of reasons, but the little ornaments, the tree ornaments are so special to me. So like I hadn't even realized that was so similar to then whenever I started training in the sand play and had all that collection in my office for people to use. I didn't even think, that's a connection. And then the doll's eye stuff, I never even realized it's the same. It's all small worlds, and it's all symbols and 3D images of anything and everything. And of course there's stuff in the Christmas that's mythical, and there's stuff in the sand play that's mythical, and the doll's house is normal every day. But that's the only difference.
It's wonderful. It's what sidebar, I after diagnosis last year started taking my and other people's neurodivergence very seriously, and so you have all the when you're late diagnosed as an adult, everything's a revelation, everything is a reframing of everything that went before, and things fall into place and make sense. Me being me, I started a spreadsheet, and I started every time something occurred to me, I want to remember that, I've got hundreds and hundreds of cells filled with this stuff now that I can use when I write or teach or whatever. And one of them is I've started a list of spins, and I thought there'd be 5 or 6, and there are dozens and dozens of them, because they change so frequently. There are some that are very long term, like what I've been talking about today, but there are loads, and I'm saving them actually because I think we've probably got huge amounts to talk about and share. I really would encourage people listening to get in touch with us, autisticlicense@gmail.com, or visit us at autisticlicense.com, and there's a contact form there, because this is exactly the kind of thing that I really, really want to hear what other people's versions of this are.
Yes,
and what sense they make of them, if any. And the joy, because actually, another sidebar, this is not our scheduled recording day, it's tomorrow, and and Shauna texted me a little while ago. We did this once before. We did an ad hoc recording out of the blue, and it was really enjoyable. I wasn't ready to record this evening because I'm kind of in the middle of work, and it's a bit of a setup, but Shauna was quite insistent that we record, because what if something really lovely happens and we can't recreate it when we actually come to record tomorrow? And you're absolutely right, as usual. And what you mentioned was capturing something of the joy of what we're doing, and that's definitely happening at this end. Hearing even just that moment about your multiple Christmas trees. And
yes, Leo clapped his hands.
Just as another sidebar, one of our listeners messaged us on Facebook a couple of days ago, just having heard the title, and said she did happy flapping just at the title. And
Lovely.
so thank you ever so much for letting us know about that.
Thank you very much. We love to hear from people. Honestly,
yes.
Anybody who has, even if you don't think you've got anything to say, please get in touch. Just say, hello, I'm here. We will read. We will really take in anything, any connection that you say. That's really, really important.
Thank you. Yes. We're Autistic Licensed Podcast. We've got our website. We've got the podcast. We're on Facebook and X and Threads and Instagram.
Okay, and just to say, I'm not on any of those things, so I don't know what any of those things are. But Leo will.
those are our social medias. Yes,
the two sides of autistic experience. Some people know everything about tech, and other people know very, very little. I wanted to kind of go back there. You know, I felt like it would be good to record so that we could get the kind of the joy and the enthusiasm in our voices and in our expression and how we would talk. But I also said that, like, I don't want to talk about the same thing the next day. So I think that was part of it as well. Like, I kind of knew that even if we were texting tonight about this, that then tomorrow we would be on another day and we would talk about something else, and it wouldn't be this. And that's something that I've talked to you lots about in the podcast. Like, on one level, I want people to say, what should we talk about? And on another, I really don't know how to do that. Like, I only know how to talk about whatever is present right there, right then. And that's something that, you know, I know it's obviously relevant to now and to the podcast, but I don't know how much of it is like an autism thing as well, where I just don't know how I'm going to be on a certain day.
That's kind of counterintuitive. I'm really interested and quite fascinated, and again, quite flappy and joyful about this difference. Because it's counterintuitive. Okay. And what I mean by that is I'm ADHD, I'm autistic and I'm ADHD, and we often talk about the delineations of those two things with me. You're autistic and we talk about the high probability that there's some ADHD going on there too. But normally, I think, just to characterize and who we are individually, you will want a slower pace and more predictability. Because of my ADHD bit, I'm quite get quite excited, move ahead sometimes too quickly, do stuff. But in this case, this is different. This is the opposite way round. This was me going, no, tomorrow's recording day. Let's let's have a chat now, see what comes out, and then we can, mold it and sculpt it and form it into something that's organised. Let's not get carried away. And then you're saying, no, there might be something amazing happening, and tomorrow will be different, and that's really spontaneous. Do you know what I mean, though? Yeah. That's where we kind of swap over.
Yeah, do you remember, like, it happened before? Do you remember? Well, even one of the ones we did record and we put out before was another time when I was excitable, though, because it was just after the concert.
Yes.
And so there's something, maybe there's something around, but there's also, it's like, if it's on the day, then I think we are getting at something here, because I think what we notice, like, I think we've sort of noticed this before, where if it's on the day and it's really, really short notice and it's spontaneous, then I can do it because there's been no psychological pre-planning. I seem to be able to do it way easier than you whenever it's really short notice.
Yes.
But if it's in between and it's, not long notice and not really, really short, then I don't seem to be able to do it.
Fascinating. I know that for me, it's because I make big deals in my head about practical things I've got to do, and they become massive obstacles. So, for example, when we started this call today, I hadn't set up my recording gear, which, as it happened, what did that take? 45 seconds? Minute and a half tops. It was nothing.
Long.
It was nothing.
No,
so
it was nothing.
If I'm going to learn anything, and I probably won't from this evening, it's that is not an obstacle. I can throw that together very, very quickly, and we can start talking almost instantaneously. It doesn't matter. But there's that bit that's probably one of those impasses between ADHD and autistic brains, where there's wanting to get it right and for it to be just so, and the other bit that wants to move very quickly and sees that need as a big obstacle when it practically absolutely isn't.
Yeah. And and maybe we can't even make rules about this. Maybe it all just depends on what's gone before, like in the day. And, you know, just like for me, it's like just a felt sense where I know that I can do something, but I might not have known, like I definitely wouldn't have known yesterday that I could do this tonight. Like I wouldn't have committed to it. Wouldn't have made sense to. We already had a time on the next day. But like it wouldn't have made sense. Whereas, but maybe I was also, I'd already been sort of painting and relaxing for a good hour. I mean, you hadn't. You've been working. So maybe my readiness was easier, but then that could have been different on a different night, because on a different night I might have thought, oh, don't take me away from my painting. So like it could have gone either way. Maybe it just isn't clear cut. Like maybe it
isn't, is it? No, that's the point. In fact, this has been such a theme in my work over the last 2 weeks. You know how, for people not in the therapy world, there's this very odd thing that all therapists will recognise, that themes develop throughout the practice, throughout all the people that you're working with, all at the same time, seemingly without any kind of prompting, although I do accept that I'm the common factor. But nevertheless, people seem to bring similar, and it's not necessarily practical things. In this case, it is quite conceptual. And the concept that I've been talking with so much is this idea of consistency. And what that means to a neurotypical person versus a neurodivergent person, just even the idea of what that means is very different, and how we are expected to be consistent in our quirks, traits, however you want to phrase those things. And, you know, the example that I know I've given before is, you know, how come you're so sensitive to all this sound of people talking when you can go to concerts and listen to really, really loud, overwhelming music? That doesn't make sense. There's this expectation that there should be some consistency. For me, it's entirely consistent, because those are completely different things in my experience. But there's been so much talk about the expectation of consistency, and us feeling that we have to justify ourselves all the time, because to an onlooker, what we're doing doesn't make sense and is inconsistent. We're not following a consistent set of rules, seemingly. And I think that's a real struggle. I don't know how this fits in with spins, to be honest. But, well, actually, I've got, as I say, I have special interests that have been lifelong. And then there are ones that last for, I think the cycle seems to be about 3 years, the longer term ones, and then they just fizzle out. And then there are ones that are deep dives that last maybe like a week, and I'll learn all the things that I need to learn about it and get obsessed and watch all the videos, and then move on to something else because it's served its purpose. So there isn't even consistency within how I treat special interests. Is this, and to bring it back to us and to the people we work with too, is that something that you talk about? And okay, two things. One, is that something that you talk about in terms of special interests? But the other thing I think actually that's more relevant to what we're doing today and what we're experiencing today is, how and if do you express this kind of autistic joy? And, you know, that's a phrase I've become really familiar with and I really like a lot. Do you express that in your work? It moves towards the area of disclosure, which I think we'll talk about another time. But I get very, very excited. And I don't try to necessarily... I warn people at the beginning that I'm not a blank canvas therapist, that I do not have a poker face, and that I will display my reactions, especially the excitable ones.
Okay. So that was so much.
I know, I'm so sorry.
So much.
I apologise. Take whatever you like from that. I don't mind.
Take whatever I like from that. I would love to. I'd love to be able to hear it all again and know what my tangents were. And sometimes, let's even start with that. What I am very, very, very real with people that I work with is that I can't take on large amounts of information. So I do have to say to people, look, I know that it might seem like I'm interrupting, and I might actually interrupt. But I have to do that because I will I can't take in, I have to chunk what you're saying. So in the past, I would have heard what you've just said there, and I would have really fought to mask the fact that my head was like going off in a million different tangents so that I could stay with you. And then I would get to the end of it and I would think, okay, I'll be able to talk about that last little bit, and sort of, it would feel like I didn't necessarily want to lead the conversation that way. I just had to offer some kind of reflective phase to support the person that I had really been with them and I had really been listening, and to encourage them to continue talking. As someone who has become much more authentic and accepting of my own limits, I will now kind of say, can we just stop? I know that you've got more to say, and let's just agree that we're coming back to exactly here, and these are the words that you've just said. But can we just go back to what you've just said, and can we make sure that I've heard that and that you've really heard yourself say that? And oftentimes it's whenever I say that bit that then people will say, I didn't really hear myself say that, because I was ready to move on to the next thing. And then the next and the next and the next. So I didn't do that with you because I'm not switched on tonight in kind of really, really, really attentive, therapeutic kind of mode. But that is something that, because of my processing style or speed, I have to, if I'm going to try and summarize, that's all fake, so all those skills that I was taught way back when, there had to be a level of putting on, because my mind can't take all of that in, now it will in the future. Like, what might happen to me in 2 or 3 hours is I might actually recall everything that you've just said in that little bit of time.
Yeah.
But I don't know now that I've heard it. But I may well have. But then in sessions or whatever, then that's not any use to the person if I'm going to remember it 3 or 4 hours later.
Yes.
So I've completely diverted from what you were talking about, just to kind
That's
of
why we're here. It doesn't matter.
That's why, just to try and get some kind of a here and now experience of what it's like to be autistic and to be listening and paying attention, and trying to diligently and consciously sort of unmask and discuss that, so that it's not, so that it's transparent, and so that it's,
that's it, isn't it? That's always been, when I started my training, I didn't know why, now I do. My thing was, I want people to be able to see the workings. I want it to be transparent, the actual process. One of the reasons I chose transactional analysis is because all the terminology is plain English and is designed to be shared in session. And although I now realise that needs quite a lot of retooling to work with myself as an autistic person and with the people I work with as autistic people, that but that is that transparency. So explaining, this is how I am, this is how I might respond in a thing, these are where my limits are, and so we will have to work within those. I as you know, I now allow myself to take notes during sessions, but I've opened it up to be kind of mutually beneficial. So I use this electronic e-ink tab, which I can use as a visual aid also with the people I work with, and we make literal bookmarks. You know, somebody will bring something up and then go off at a tangent. I will make a bookmark and I'll show it to them, or we'll come back to it. And, you know, we can make collections of them for future sessions. And that's totally mutual. I need to do that too.
Yeah.
Because I can't necessarily track things live multiply in that way.
Yes.
In the way that you're describing. So that's also an inconsistency, actually. That kind of doesn't make sense. I am very systematic. I listen for a living and I make connections for a living with neurodivergent people, but there are particular ways in which I get tripped up by that and have to adapt the process. And I think we're a very, very accommodating, adaptive and forgiving bunch. So it seems to work really well. And I'm so grateful for the people that I work with that I get that back, you know. It's very mutual.
Yeah, and even with non-neurodivergent clients, hello to any of my neurotypical clients who happen to be listening. I don't just work with autistic and neurodivergent clients, and I find that, you know, to the non-autistic ones who, you know, it's relevant for me to be out to whatever degree with, that we find a way for them to benefit from the way that I process. Because sometimes it's neurotypical people who speak so fast and don't hear themselves that really need someone like me to slow them down, that almost need permission to do that. And for IFS, especially online IFS, IFS is internal family systems, for anybody who is listening and doesn't know the abbreviation. Many people do it with their eyes shut, which is really, really helpful for a therapist like me, because then I can be writing and taking notes, and then I can feed that back to them, and they're not looking for eye contact. So I'm not attending to their need for eye contact, because they don't need that, because they've got their eyes shut and they're kind of in their own process. But I can speak into it from a place of having written while they're speaking. And I don't tend to, if somebody's got their eyes open, I don't tend to write. I do sometimes. Sometimes I'll say to somebody, I want to write that down because I want to remember it for you for, you know, after the process, and then I'll talk to them about the things that they said. You know, and the same with sandplay. Sometimes people will say something in part of their story, and I'll say, do you want me to record your story? And then I'll have the story for them. So sometimes I ask for permission for that, because you're just never going to recall all the exact words and the phrases that they say, especially if they're in that kind of altered state, you know, which sometimes people are when they're doing processes like that. So I think sometimes that must naturally appeal to people like us, you know, the same with the TA and writing it down and tracking it, that actually that's kind of at the speed that our brains want to work in any case. And it's actually a gift to people working with us to be given permission not to be with somebody who's racing ahead, or no one's ever going to think that I'm going to work anything out before them. Like, you know, and I think that can be quite reassuring for people who have a fear that a therapist is somehow reading their mind, or is going to know things about them, that it's just, you know, it's just not gonna, for people who have that fear, it's just not gonna happen. Like I'll repeat back to them what they said, or I'll come to something and I'll wonder about something, and then they might hear it, but it doesn't feel like I'm, you know, putting all the dots together and then giving it to them. And I guess we want to empower people, but I feel like it's very, very, very natural way of being for me to be like that anyway. You know, whereas if my mind worked faster, maybe that would feel more, I would come across more as that kind of person that was going to get an insight.
I just had such a weird and a specific mental image that you just brought to mind there, because I have multiple speeds of mind, and again, there's inconsistency there. So sometimes often I am way ahead, and I connect all the dots even before they finish the thing. Or sometimes, as we've been saying, I need to track very, very carefully and make sure that I record mentally or actually, what it is that's being said, so that we can review. And the mental image that came to my head is if you've ever been on escalators and the handrail moves at a different speed to the steps, and you have to adjust your arm constantly. That's all. I don't even have a consistent. I have inconsistent multiple speeds of thought.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah,
and that's you have to change gear a lot, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know if I have that. I don't know that it's not, it's not good or bad, but I don't know that I do speed up.
No, what you're describing is more consistent, counterintuitive.
It is more consistent, isn't
what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, I don't kind of want to be straightforward either. Like there's this quite a sassy part that just kind of goes, do you know what? Everybody's a head fuck, really. You can take that out or you can leave that in.
I've never done a bleep before. I'll practice my bleeping.
Have I never sworn before? I don't know.
Not on the show, no.
Well, you can decide. But there is just that kind of, place, we're human, we're not robots, and we're not supposed to be just understandable all of the time in every scenario. And maybe that's the stereotype of an autistic person, isn't it? Like, people have tried to put us into boxes and say, you will be like this. Are you looking at the clock, by the way? What time is it?
I did just glance and say, it's just, yeah. We'll wrap up in a moment.
I saw that, Leo.
On the subject, I know. I wasn't trying to hide it. I have actually positioned a clock just above my camera, and so I can sneak a look, but you're too sharp
you didn't,
for me.
Yeah, you didn't sneak it,
What I was going to say is I had another bit of feedback from somebody who, and they couldn't remember what the terminology was, but we chucked in some terminology and not explained what it was. Now that's going to happen all the time. And as far as we can, we do name the stuff and explain, but that's another very good reason to get in touch. Please let us know if we've said something that doesn't make sense or you want a little explanation of. We will absolutely give it to you on the next edition. Autistic License, spelt the British way with all C's, apart from the S in autistic. autisticlicense@gmail.com and autisticlicense.com. That was clear.
And yes, that was really clear. I can define what a head fuck is. So, no, I'm just messing. It's not an autistic.
It would have been fun though if people had asked. I've scanned the IFS literature and I can't find any reference to headfuck.
Right, Leo. I shall see you tomorrow.
Yes, I look forward to it. Lovely.
Cheerio.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Autistic License podcast. We're very open to feedback and suggestions for future topics. You can connect with us via Instagram, Facebook at autisticlicense.com or email autisticlicense@gmail.com. If you're interested in therapy with an autistic counsellor, you can visit thrivingautistic.org.